Hi, this is Ned Siegfried from Siegfried and Jensen. As proud sponsors of BeliefCast, we hope you are inspired by Todd's weekly podcasts, which contain so many courageous stories of recovery and personal growth. Remember, it's not what happened in the past that matters, it's what happens in the future. We invite you all to work hard and be optimistic about your future. Enjoy today's podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Todd Sylvester with the Todd Inspires BeliefCast. Once again, thank you for tuning in, and thank you for supporting me and believing in me and the good cause. I'd like to give a shout out as well to my sponsors, Siegfried and Jensen, Wasatch Recovery, Thread Wallets, Maury Nutrition, and then the music you're hearing at the beginning and the end of this podcast is by my good friend Paul Cardall. He's an award-winning pianist, an amazing man, and so thank you for letting us use your music, Paul. And today we're joined by one of the best embodiment coaches on the planet, Ajaya Sommers. Ajaya, thanks for being here.
Oh, totally my honor to be here with you, Todd.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to get to know you better and also to talk about all this amazing things that you're doing. I'm going to give a little background. I won't share the whole thing because you're doing so much. I don't know if I can say it all, but we'll get it from you as well. But you're a gifted teacher, a podcaster, a public speaker, a creative catalyst in the field of psycho-spiritual somatic integration. That's a tongue twister, but we're going to talk more about that. For the last 28 years, Ajaya has been instrumental in facilitating conscious evolution in thousands of people's lives. You know, and I've been following you for a while, ever since Susan connected us, and you have the perfect voice for what you do. It is so soothing. It is so meditative. It is so powerful at the same time, if you will. I'm sure people have told you that before, but you just have this energy about you that's just so safe and calm and soothing. Has people told you that before?
I suppose maybe once or twice, but thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. You're also the founder of a unique somatic discovery process called Core Embodiment. We're going to get more into that, basically how to tap into the power of our human potential. You deal with people who struggle with all kinds of things, especially trauma. And you talk about the power of the mind and belief systems. And so there's just so much to talk about. So, guys, we're in for a treat today. Why don't we start a little bit about your childhood and maybe where you grew up?
Sure. Thank you. I had kind of an unusual, I would say, upbringing. By the time I was 5 or 6, my mom had divorced my biological father.
Okay.
And she, actually way early on, but she had, by the time I was 5 or 6, remarried. And my mom and my stepdad were Sufi ministers, and we moved to upstate New York, and they were very involved with a Sufi community in the Berkshire Mountains.
Okay.
So very formative time in my early development was spent there. So very spiritual community, very small kind of subculture. And so I wasn't very exposed to the more dominant culture, private school. So, yeah, I think that had, on the one hand, that was a beautiful privilege and blessing of my life to have such a spiritual and, just very much supported as a soul.
Right.
But then, of course, it's been challenging in my life to figure out how to be human and be in the world and how to be in the culture, but not of the culture.
Gotcha. Wow. Do you have siblings?
Yeah, I have 3 younger half brothers.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're the oldest, trying to keep them all in line. Right?
They're doing all right on their own, but yeah, I suppose earlier on.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
you're, like we said, you're doing a lot of great things now, and you do a lot of, we're going to get into the embodiment stuff that you do, but were you like you are now, were you kind of like that way as a child, where you're this kind of connected with your soul as you talk about, and just, were you like that as a younger child, or was it completely opposite and you had to figure this out because of a struggle? Or, tell us a little bit about who you were back then.
Well, I remember as a child, I would be introduced as an old soul,
Okay.
Um, so I think, yes, I think I was always connected. I don't ever remember having some kind of, basic rupture between my heart, my deeper sense of self. Whereas most people do go through some kind of, what the Hopi would call the sacred wound, some kind of early rupture.
Mm,
I think that my journey is unique in that way. Not that I certainly didn't have my share of developmental trauma and just, being here on the planet and
yeah.
being in a body, but I think comparatively, um, that was unique in my experience. And then again, I think my family was very interested in encouraging and supporting and celebrating who I was more on a soul level than a conditioning level.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see, I mean, old soul makes a lot of sense, based on the stuff that I've watched of yours and listened of yours. And you said something I want to go back to because I want our listeners to understand this a little deeper. You called it the sacred wound,
Mm,
right? Talk about what you meant by that, because I think our listeners will really benefit from that. Because I know what I think you're talking about, but it would be great to hear what that means and maybe shed some light on that for us.
sure. Well, that term, the sacred wound, comes from the Hopi tradition.
Mm,
And they have an understanding that generally early in life, we all have some kind of experience, a quality of a rupture of our intrinsic trust with ourselves, with God, or usually it's happening in the relational field. So it's also in relationship to other. In, psychology, we would call that developmental trauma. There's
mm,
something that occurs or doesn't occur. Sometimes developmental trauma isn't just what happened to you, but it's what didn't happen for you. And so the way we're being shaped through, I think of it like as little beings, we come in connected to source, connected to who we are, connected to our bodies. And we're basically saying, here I am, celebrate me, see me, play with me. And we send out our signals. And, I think we've all inherited a degree of intergenerational trauma and ancestral trauma. And so it's not necessarily our parents' fault, but they're doing the best they can based on what they were given. So a lot of times those signals are not met. And if they're not met to the point where there's abuse or there's severe abandonment or severe isolation or some kind of actual violation, we tend to split from ourselves, from our body, from our hearts, from our desires, from our needs, really from who we are on a core level, and we dissociate. And so
okay.
that's a more, elaborate way of describing the sacred wound. And then most of us spend our lives, if you're on a path of awakening and recovery, as you call it, we
Yeah.
spend our lives trying to come back home to who we actually are.
Mm,
And
mm,
things like addictions, are great ways to deal with the pain or to try to cope with the pain of that original wound or splitting from self.
ooh, very well said. Beautifully said. It hit me because one of the best definitions I've ever heard of depression in my field and with the mentors I've had in my life, I heard this and I thought, wow, this makes so much sense. Is depression is pretending to be someone you're not.
Mm,
And I would love to hear your thoughts on that because, man, when I heard that the first time, I was like, man, that makes a lot of sense to me. I may not be able to fully explain it when I first heard it, but I thought, man, that makes a lot of sense. And you were just talking about coming back to who you really are again. What do you think of that? Does that ring true to you as well?
absolutely. I love that definition.
Yeah,
And I think in my own life, the times where maybe I felt on the depressive side of my mental health, that there's truth to that.
yeah,
Um, and I was just thinking this morning, it's like our culture, I think, preys on this. So what can often come out of that core wound, that core leaving of self, is that we internalize a sense of deficiency. Something's wrong with me, something's lacking, something's missing. It's my fault. And
mm,
so then our culture preys on that, and that we feel we have to prove ourselves, prove our value, prove our worth. And it's all caught up in self-images and, prestige and accolades and what we call success. It's all external ways we're giving our sense of self and power away, right? To what other people think, to what other people say. And so, of course, you're going to end up feeling like you're pretending you're some, imposter.
Wow. Yeah. Man, there's so much I want to talk about because, I think before I ask this next question, because it's going to get into what you do, I think people hear embodiment coach and they go, oh, yeah, I've heard that before, but I don't know if they even understand what that even means. Do you mind explaining that too, so we have a better understanding of exactly what that is and kind of what you do?
Sure. I'll do my best to to give a definition.
Please.
You know, to embody is essentially defined as, taking an idea, taking something in the invisible and making it a reality, right? So we all have lots of ideas, but to embody them is to live them, right? Whether that's a tangible project or, something you're actualizing. But I think embodiment and being an embodiment coach is really about, to me, we have these three centers. We have a gut brain, we have a heart brain, we have a head brain. These are our three main biological oscillating centers in which we perceive reality, we experience reality. And these three centers are designed to be in communication or coherence. To me, embodiment is actually occupying those three centers. So in our Western culture, most of us are trained to largely live out of our heads. And again, our culture largely praises knowledge and, science and head-based, quote, intelligence.
Yeah.
And, if you grew up in a culture like Japan or somewhere where martial arts is honored, you might have a relationship with your hara, with your gut brain, and more of your instinctual wisdom, right? Or if you grew up in somewhere like India, you might have more of a relationship with your heart. So I think, to me, in our modern world, I really feel to be an embodied leader is to fully occupy those three seats of conscious awareness, and not just live from your head or your heart or your gut. We really need all three. Right. And so that does go, more in depth in the work that I do. But that's kind of my redefinition of embodiment. It's not just about being in your body. It is also, of course, utilizing the intelligence of your brain and your heart and your instinctual center.
Love that. So like when someone says, man, I have a gut feeling that I shouldn't do this, or it's wrong, or whatever it may be, I shouldn't go down this path. Mm-hmm. Is that part of that gut brain you're talking about, where that gut instinct is telling you, hey, wake up, don't go down this road. I'm trying to help you kind of thing. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And I love how Gabor Mate talks about this in his own way, where he says, if you were left in the wild for a day or even some hours, if you did not listen to your gut wisdom, you'd be in big trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very primary and a primal part of our relationship, actually, to being on the earth and being in relationship with other people, with making wise decisions, having discernment. It's that very primal yes or no.
Yeah. Okay.
Am I moving towards something that's nourishing for me or not? And so your head can have all these ideas to try to talk yourself out of why you should do something or why you shouldn't, right? Yeah. But the body, generally, there's an immediate yes or no.
Right. Beautiful. Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. That's awesome. Gabor, his book, The Myth of Normal, I just started reading that. I'm about 2 chapters in and I'm just blown away already. I'm like, holy cow, this guy, wow. I mean, on another level, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I love him.
Yeah. He's amazing. So, jumping back of another thing you said, you talked about worth and what our worth is. I mean, I'm sure you deal with clients all the time who they show up, they, day one, if you will, and are like, man, I just think I'm less than, I'm not good enough, I'm broken. Whatever the narrative may be. How, talk about what is our worth and how do you deal with someone who really struggles with worth for them to actually see that the worth is there?
Yeah. I have to say, Todd, that is pretty much like the number one narrative
Yeah.
underneath all narratives and all suffering and experiences. I really feel like that's the one that I see most regularly.
Yeah.
And just this morning I was in a meditation and I was noticing how just in my own life, the fullness of life every day, the accelerated times we're in, the many opportunities and decisions and things that I'm personally fielding and we're all fielding. And I was watching how through my own practice, slowly I was like, removing my consciousness off of all these external sort of objects of attention and coming back home to my core.
Yeah.
To the point where I could fill up again with just feeling me here in the simplicity of my own presence. And I'm sharing this because this is essentially what I do with people is give them an experience, guide them into an experience they can feel that's not so much about what they think about themselves or how other people perceive them, but it's a feeling experience that they can tangibly allow to fill up with. It's like filling up with who you are, not what you do or how people see you or how much money you have or, whatever the external reflections. So to give people a tangible experience of that, it really depends, if I'm working with someone individually, it depends on them and finding that pathway that they can actually kind of walk on. It's unique for, I think, each person.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. One of the things I try to do with my clients is, I kind of dumb it down for me and my clients where it's, who was I when I was a little kid? What are the characteristics of that child kind of thing? And it's, I really believe we don't lose that. We just forget that they're there. And if I'm understanding correctly, it's kind of what you do is you help people tap back into that. It's not childish, but childlike state again. Is that accurate on some level?
Yeah. I mean, in the sense of our intrinsic or innate innocence,
Yeah.
who we were prior to any kind of sense of feeling broken or ruptured, our trust ruptured, who that original kind of blueprint of who you are, essentially. So there's a childlike innocence, but it's also who you are as a soul.
Gotcha.
Or another way is just, your presence.
Yeah. Yeah. You're just your presence. It's nothing external, like you were talking about. It's internal. It's already there. It's built in us. It's in our DNA. It's who we are to our core. Right.
Right. It's what's looking out through your eyes right now and hearing through your ears and beating your heart and breathing your lungs.
Wow. I love that. There was a quote by Eckhart Tolle where he says, we are the universe inside of a human body for a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's when you look at it, if you really kind of contemplate that, that's powerful, right?
And what a beautiful reminder, how precious this short period of time is.
Right.
Being in a human birth and body.
Yeah. So, let's talk a little bit about your discovery process, your core embodiment, and maybe just kind of explain what that is. Maybe tell our listeners kind of what you do on a daily basis, who your clients are, that kind of thing, and ultimately kind of what you're trying to accomplish with all of this.
Mm-hmm. Those are big questions. Yeah, as I can be.
I'm sorry.
No, it's great. Well, so I notice a lot of my clients are people who have already been on, you could say, the spiritual path. You know, they're already people who are interested in waking up to, you know, who am I?
Right.
How do I live my greatest potential? How do I self-actualize? You know, these kinds of people. So I would say some of those people have been on what I call like an ascension journey, where they've used spirituality to bypass their humanity. And so, meaning they've used spirituality as a way to avoid feeling and having a relationship with their needs and their biological intelligence. So again, another version of living in the head, only maybe through more of a spiritual frame.
Okay.
So for those people, it's a lot about bringing them through a kind of descension process of reclaiming a relationship with their needs, their feelings, their body sensations, these more sort of vulnerable, intimate terrain of the human experience, right?
Right.
Then there's people who I would say in my practice who have high level of trauma, who much more like complex trauma, and they're very dissociated. And so for them to feel and be here at all, it usually is a longer process of, you know, and those people, you know, I work a lot with touch, whether it's being in person with people and bringing in my own touch, but I can also teach people practices where they touch themselves.
Right.
So they can feel themselves and develop a loving relationship with touching themselves. And that can be really supportive when someone's very dissociative and ungrounded. So there's kind of a spectrum, you know. I mean, I would say the majority of my people are kind of higher level, higher functioning humans who are therapists and doctors and in the you know service professional space themselves. And maybe they're going for a deeper level of integration and refinement and embodiment of the things they already know, but they don't feel they're fully living. Or maybe they have challenges in their relationships and their capacity to, you know, skillfully communicate themselves or, you know, be available for more intimacy, that kind of thing. Then I would say with pretty much everybody, I'm going to bring in some somatic practices where, again, we work with touch. Sometimes we work with sound because sound is one of the most powerful ways to permeate or penetrate dense tissue. And a lot of times in that early trauma we were talking about, we develop sort of protections or a defense system to protect our heart, to protect our more vulnerable younger parts that survived that, right? Yeah. And it lives in the body and it lives in the nervous system. Yeah. So what I find is that people can't just through talk therapy dissolve that defense system. Often it needs a co-regulatory shared space, a corrective kind of co-regulatory shared space, and also bringing in touch, bringing in sound. We can pattern interrupt the normal way we breathe. And for most people, we are continuing to maintain that defense system through our breath pattern. And so sound is basically an audible exhale. And so we can increase our capacity to breathe in when we work with long, elongated sound exhales. Then there's more room to breathe in. You know, we're tonifying the vagus nerve. All kinds of great things are happening that, again, take you below the realm of just the mind. And it drops people into more of a feeling experience in their bodies.
Love that. It sounds amazing what you do. It sounds like just these enlightenment moments for not only you and your clients. And is that something where, I mean, do you ever like, I don't know, pinch yourself sometimes going, man, I get to do this. I get to help people in this area. I mean, obviously it seems like you were born to do this. Does it feel that way?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of an unusual path. Um, yeah, I think I've just always had a fascination with what are we and what are we made of and what is the purpose and what is our potential? And I do think we're in an interesting time on the planet and just phase of evolution where there's so much more technology and AI and sort of externalizations, the speed in which our attention is kind of out, 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 that
Right.
I think these kinds of practices are really important in this time to support people in staying connected to the earth, to biological intelligence, and to these deeper wisdom centers that are actually how we were designed to live from.
Right.
Um,
Love that.
so it is a privilege to kind of, have that stand.
Yeah. Right. Well, so you help a lot of people, and you're doing a lot of good out there. Like we said, you're a teacher, you're a podcaster, you're a public speaker as well, and you're doing a lot of great things. What do you do for you? What does your day look like for you? Like, how do you keep yourself centered? What are some, or maybe your morning routines or daily practices that kind of help you kind of keep your feet grounded, if you will? Because again, helping people, because that's what I do. It can get exhausting at times. It can be overwhelming at times.
Mm.
What does your day look like for you?
Thanks for that question, Todd.
Uh,
Well, I do find that waking up and I do the practice I teach.
right.
So core embodiment is a practice that again works with the gut brain, the heart brain, and the head brain. And so there's three sounds, and basically there's three sounds I work with to bring my attention fully into those centers. There's also a movement practice that's connected to the way we developed as embryos. So it's kind of like our native language. The first language was movement, was a breathing motion. So there's something for me in connecting with that, seating myself in that, running myself through the practice. Originally, it came to me when I was starting to write my book about 7 years ago as a way to get out of my own way and clear my channel and receive fresh information. And so I really use it the same way now. In the morning, I just, have pen and paper nearby and dive into the practice, and I get inspiration. I get ideas. Things come through. I write them down. So I might have my schedule for the day, but I'm also receiving fresh inspiration that feels like guidance to follow through. And I think for me, a lot of staying centered has to do with staying connected to my inspiration,
Mm,
like my why of what's behind what I'm doing, and having it be fresh, having those new impulses and new ideas, or new, directives that I feel like I'm being guided to do. Um, So then from my practice, I usually do some kind of yoga or go to the gym or go swim at the beach. Part of it for me is living in Hawaii. It has been a game changer because
yeah.
there's just, a different pacing here and obviously a lot of nature to entrain with.
What island are you on?
Maui.
Maui. Okay. My family and I just we went to Kauai back in August. I've never been to any of the islands ever, and that was my first experience, and it was amazing. I couldn't believe how beautiful it was. My favorite part of the whole thing was getting up early enough to go see the sunrise right where the waves were crashing into these lava rocks and stuff. It was like, wow, this place is amazing.
Yeah,
You
it's there's nowhere else like it, it's a special place. I'm glad you got
Yeah,
to have that experience.
yeah, yeah, and that suits you perfectly. Honestly, that you're in Maui makes sense.
Well, I was in the Bay Area most of my life, and
Oh,
that's
okay.
moved from here, and which is a beautiful place too. But yeah, there's just like a speed that
Yeah.
is easy to entrain with. And I feel like, yeah, in your question, part of staying connected to myself is about staying connected to my pacing,
Okay.
the pacing of my nervous system, the pacing of the speed I literally need to live my life at to stay present with myself.
Okay.
You know,
Wow.
if I get going too fast and there's too many things on the plate, I can start to disconnect, and doesn't bode well.
Right. So, another question I have for you, you really help people awaken and align to the power of their potential, if you will. How would you describe what human potential is?
Well, on one level, I think we don't know. Like,
Mm.
we are still evolving as a species. And so it's kind of an exciting frontier. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we're not done. We're not done in terms of how our brains are developing. There's so much right now in the field of longevity medicine and biohacking and different ways people are exploring the process of aging, the process of, just literally our physical, mental, emotional capacities. I think this is kind of the exciting end of the advances in technology, that there's also a lot of devices and tech space things that are also supporting our potential. So on one level, I think it's just this frontier of who knows the limit. Like, we'll see what the potential is of, what we're capable of, what we're
Yeah.
but on a really practical, grounded, day-to-day level, I think what I'm referring to there is just each of us has a unique, I think, self-actualization. I kind of like part of, in the 6-month course I teach, is I take people through almost like we're reclaiming our developmental journey. And I sort of combine some of Maslow's hierarchy of needs and this body of work called NARM that I studied, where we work with developmental needs, and also Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication, where he works with needs. And so one of the needs in that journey is to self-actualize. And so that potential in each of us is, I think of it more like we each have a unique dharma based on, your particular early wounding and trauma and life experience. I think the journey of a lifetime is ultimately to make medicine of it.
Okay.
And have it be of service to others. So I imagine, like in your case, I don't know your whole story, but I know you had a time where you were in an addiction actively, and then you had a recovery, and then you're fully recovered, and you're now about supporting other people to be recovered. And, so there was a journey that, a trajectory and a journey in your own life of you self-actualizing based on what you lived through. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Beautifully said. I love that. So, you handle kind of almost anyone. I mean, like, what's your typical client, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, who comes to you typically? Is it someone who's had trauma, or is it a wide range of things that people have gone through? They're just coming to connect and what have you. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of my clients are therapists,
Mm.
or doctors, or people, again, in the healthcare field, who seem to be interested in, like, who've already done a lot of work, but are interested in a deeper level of integration or refinement, or, again, embodiment. They know the stuff, they're trained, they're schooled, they've got the knowledge, but maybe they're aware they're not fully embodying it in their life. There's some breakdown, whether it's their health or their intimate relationships or even their business. There's some gap between what they know and what they're living. So to me, that's an indication there's an embodiment piece, right?
Okay, gotcha.
So I would say that's the majority of my clientele. Although, again, I do have people that I work with more in person or like in an immersion, who might have more severe trauma that, let's say, has to do with, it's kind of funny. I'm not like super public about this, but sometimes I say like I'm a surrogate mother because I seem to attract, especially men, but women too, who have mother wounding, who just didn't have the mothering they needed. And so they have a lot of, again, self-worth issues.
Yeah.
And so I find that work can be done online, but being in person and having, again, that co-regulatory shared system and having hands-on and eye contact and skin contact and all of that,
Yeah.
it's almost like we create the corrective environment of what they never got. And I think because of my training and my background and understanding of perinatal psychology and all these things, there's just some way that there's a lot of nuances there that I can basically, like, we create a new experience that they never had and that they've been looking for. And then it's almost like the nervous system can settle because it got what it was finally looking for.
Yeah.
And some of these individuals, they're in their late 70s or early 80s, or, they've lived a long time.
Yeah.
But they're still suffering on some level from feeling a closure that happened really early on.
Yeah.
And they just know, like, before I die, I've got to heal this.
Gotta heal this. Yeah. Wow. I was smiling when you were saying that, people who have had trouble maybe on the mom side of things really connect with you. It doesn't surprise me, again, because like we said at the beginning, you're very, you feel safe. You have a calming voice about you. The energy that you kind of portray, even what I'm feeling here, just talking to you via, on the computer, I can feel it. And it's pretty amazing. It's a gift that you have, obviously. And it's pretty cool that you found it and that you are sharing it with the world, if you will.
Thank you so much, Todd. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Reflection.
Yeah. It's amazing. I would love to be on the level you are, but I do feel like I can read people. I read people's energies. When my clients come in, man, I can tell right away they're in a bad place or things are going really well for them or what have you. And it's just cool to feel your energy here. It's pretty awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. If there's someone right now who's listening to your voice, who's struggling, they're in a dark place, they're not quite sure what to do, and they're struggling. You've already shared some really powerful things, but what could you tell that one person right now who might be listening to you, who's going, man, I'm in a bad place and I'm not sure what to do? What would you tell them?
I think just to not give up, to turn that struggle and angst into a prayer. And, it's like, in truth, we're never alone. This is you could say, like, a very conscious universe that we live in. And I think part of the nature of really struggling and being in a dark place is that inherently we feel isolated.
Right.
So I'd say, reach out to a friend, a family member, a therapist, reach out, like, break through that isolation. And if for some reason you can't do that, like, pray. And if you don't believe in God, I'd say, go sit in nature, because to me, you don't really need a religion or some external God. If you sit in nature, you're going to see the sacred and experience the sacred, and it will remind you that you're a part of that. If you just sit and gaze at the ocean or a lake or the stars, or even just watching the wind in the trees, I think that struggle that a lot of people feel these days is also part of a cultural context, that we're so entrained with technology and screens and self-images. And, we've lost connection to our true nature, which is nature.
Yeah.
And usually people, if they saturate themselves in nature and also some kind of loving company, they're going to start to remember themselves.
Ooh, beautifully said. Thank you for sharing that. I love that. I heard it once said, we used to look up for inspiration, and now we're all looking down. And right. And so I love that's beautiful advice for anyone who's struggling. And I appreciate that. If someone listening to you right now wants to get to know you better, look into your Core Embodiment program, and they want to, listen to your podcast or get your book or, any of that stuff, what's the best way for someone to reach out to you to get those things and to connect with you?
Yeah. My website is just my name. So AJAYASOMMERS.com. And, I am a little bit, I'm not like a huge social media person, but I do get on Instagram and Facebook a bit, and LinkedIn. But yeah, I would say my website, just reach out to me. I'm also, will do, like a free 30-minute consult with people to see if I can support them.
Yeah, beautiful. And I'll put all your links in the show notes too, so people can just link right to you when they're listening to this and be able to connect with you that way. And anyone listening to this can also reach out to me, and I'll get you connected with Ajaya and to see all the great things she's doing. And I don't know, this has been a great interview. I feel really peaceful.
That's great.
I really do. And I don't say that lightly. I really mean that. Like, I really do feel calm, and I can see why you're so good. Susan, we talked about our mutual friend that connected us. She talked my ear off for a minute about you, and it was just like on and on. And, you're kind of going, oh yeah, I'm sure she's great. But now I can see why. And I just can't thank you enough for spending some time out of your busy schedule to be on my show. It's truly an honor. I did a post today about my show, which has been going on 7 years now. We're ranked in the top 100 in mental health. We got 500,000 followers and listeners. And the reason why, it's when Isaac Newton penned in a letter in 1675, if I've been able to see a little further, it's by standing on shoulders of giants. And thank you, Ajaya, for letting us stand on your shoulders for this hour, and to be able to see a little further and to understand a little bit more, especially with our potential and who we really are and our worth. And that's what I felt today. So thank you so much.
Oh gosh, Todd, it's really my pleasure and honor and privilege. And what a joy to meet you and be with you. And may this time together ripple out as a blessing in all directions to all beings everywhere.
Yeah.
That all beings everywhere can really feel our intrinsic wholeness, and inherent worth.
Wow. Love it. Well, thank you. And folks, for tuning in. I told you today was going to be a great episode, and it did not disappoint whatsoever. Please reach out to ajayasommers.com. Again, it'll be in the show notes. Link up to her, see what she's doing, check out our program. And if you're struggling, she would be a great resource for you. And if you have someone in your family who's struggling, who you're not sure how to even connect with them, because that can be awkward sometimes, give them a link to this episode, have them listen to Ajaya, and it will help break the ice. And then you can go follow back up and say, hey, what'd you think of the episode? And then it'll open up a conversation. So please do that. Again, thanks for believing in me. Thanks to my sponsors. And Ajaya, one last thank you to you. You're the best. And
thank you, Todd.
All the goodness and energy in Maui. You need to send some our way, if you will.
Okay.
So thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure, truly.